Let's be honest, the conversation around artificial intelligence and jobs is, well, it's just noisy. One headline is telling you about a massive productivity boom, and the very next one is warning about mass unemployment. It feels almost impossible to get a straight answer. So, what is the real story here? Is AI coming to replace us or to work with us? Is it opening up a whole new world of opportunity, or is it just going to dismantle the one we've got? Okay, let's really get into it, because the actual data tells a story that's way more complex and, frankly, a lot more interesting than either of those extremes.
And you know what? Let's just start with the fear, because it's real. You can feel it everywhere. This quote you see on screen, it isn't just some random comment. It perfectly captures that anxiety. I mean, when a CEO who is right at the heart of the AI industry uses a phrase like white-collar bloodbath, that really hits a nerve, right? This isn't about robots on an assembly line anymore. That old story is over. This unease has officially moved into our offices, our creative studios, and our law firms. And there's a really specific reason why this wave of change just feels different.
For centuries, automation was pretty predictable. It went after manual jobs and routine tasks. Think of the assembly line replacing manual labor, or the ATM taking over for bank tellers. Simple stuff. But the generative AI that just exploded onto the scene in late 2022, that's a completely different animal. It is the first technology in history to directly take aim at non-routine cognitive work, the very stuff that defines modern knowledge work. We're talking about writing reports, analyzing complex data, creating designs, even writing code. So this isn't just about making a process a little more efficient. It's a deep structural shift in the foundation of our economy.
So, with that kind of existential threat on the table, you'd expect the data to be, well, pretty grim, right? Layoffs, shrinking companies, the whole deal. But this is exactly where the story takes a really sharp and honestly fascinating turn. When economists dig past the scary headlines and get into the actual hard numbers, what they're finding inside the companies that are most aggressively adopting AI, it is not at all what you'd think. So, here it is, the core finding from this landmark study led by researcher Tanya Babina, which looked at a massive data set covering something like 64% of the entire U.S. workforce. They asked a really simple question. What actually happens when a company goes all in on AI talent? And completely contrary to that bloodbath narrative, the data shows these firms are not cutting their headcount. In fact, on average, they are hiring more people. Let's put a real number on that growth, because it's pretty staggering. The research found that a one standard deviation difference in a firm's AI investment, which basically means the difference between a company that's just average and one that's seriously investing, led to a 20% difference in sales growth over a decade. That is a huge gap. It's the difference between a company that's thriving and one that's just treading water. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. It takes about 2 to 3 years for that investment to really pay off. But once it kicks in, the growth just keeps going. So if sales are booming like that, what about the jobs? Well, that impressive sales growth is tied directly to job growth. The very same firms that are investing more in AI also increase their total number of employees by about an extra 2% every single year. This just completely flies in the face of the simple idea that AI is just a tool to cut costs by getting rid of people. So if they're not firing people, where is all this new AI-powered money even coming from? This slide is the aha moment. Here's why. The data shows that a one standard deviation increase in AI investment was linked to a 13% jump in trademarks and a massive 24% increase in product patents. Meanwhile, process patents, the kind you'd file for making your existing factory line a little more efficient, they barely budged. So the story of AI, for now at least, isn't really about replacement. It's about creation. Companies are using AI as an innovation engine to build brand new things. And that kind of expansion requires more people, not fewer. Okay, so this brings up a huge paradox. If the companies on the cutting edge of AI are actually hiring more people overall, why does it still feel like so many jobs are under threat? The answer is that looking at the total number of jobs is the wrong way to see the picture. The real story isn't a loss of jobs, it's a massive reshuffle, a fundamental change in the kind of work and the type of skills that are now in demand.
Yeah, economists actually have a name for this. It's called skill-biased technological change. We saw the exact same thing happen with the computer revolution. A new technology shows up and it's not neutral. It actively makes certain skills way more valuable while making others less relevant. It's almost like a powerful magnet is pulling the entire labor market in a completely new direction, creating this intense demand for a very specific kind of employee. And I think a lot of us can feel this. The skills that were valuable even 5 or 10 years ago aren't necessarily the ones that get you hired today.
And as you can see, the data just spells this out so clearly. Inside these firms that are investing big in AI, the share of workers with a college degree went up by 3.7%. The share with master's degrees rose 2.9% and PhDs by 0.6%. But now, look at the other side of that coin. The share of workers without a college degree fell by a whopping 7.2%. Now, because total hiring actually went up, this doesn't mean these firms are just firing non-college grads left and right. What it really shows is an overwhelming preference in new hiring. They are laser-focused on bringing in more educated workers, especially people with backgrounds in science, tech, engineering, and math.
And it's not just about skills. AI is literally reshaping the org chart. That traditional corporate pyramid is getting flattened. These AI-adopting firms actually saw their share of senior and middle managers go down. At the same time, the share of junior-level employees and individual contributors, the skilled people who actually do the work but don't manage others, that increased. The key thing to understand here is that AI acts as an empowerment tool. It gives these highly skilled workers so much data and analytical power that they just don't need as many layers of management above them. The whole organization becomes less about command and control and more about a network of expert individuals.
Okay, this brings us to a really, really critical part of the story, and it's a major flashpoint for debate right now. If these innovative AI-powered companies are growing, what about the young people who are just trying to get their foot in the door? I mean, if AI is creating all this opportunity, why are we hearing story after story about a totally frozen job market for recent college graduates? Are they getting left behind in this new economy?
This is the big question. One side argues that these recent grads are kind of like the canaries in the coal mine. They're pointing the payroll data that shows a slowdown in hiring and wage growth for young workers in jobs that are highly exposed to AI. And they're saying this is just the beginning of a much bigger displacement. But another group of economists looked at the exact same time period, used different data, and they came to a very, very different conclusion. Okay, let's really break down this chart from the Economic Innovation Group because it's a critical piece of evidence in this whole debate. This chart tracks job postings over time. Each of these lines represents a category of jobs based on how exposed they are to AI. Now, just focus on that dark blue line. That represents the jobs that are the most susceptible to AI. Look really closely at when it peaked and started to fall off a cliff. It was in the spring of 2022.
The timing here is, well, it's everything. That downturn in hiring for the jobs AI is supposedly killing started a full 6 months before the public release of ChatGPT in November 2022, the event that kicked off this whole generative AI frenzy. This strongly suggests that a different force was at play. A pre-existing macroeconomic shock, specifically rising interest rates and the tech sector tightening its belt, was almost certainly the main reason for that hiring slowdown. AI didn't start the fire. It was more like gasoline poured on an existing one.
So the reality, as it usually is messy. AI is probably not the lone villain responsible for the tough entry-level market, but it is absolutely a powerful new force that is changing the game. It's raising the bar for entry-level skills, demanding more from people on day one. And it's automating a lot of the routine tasks that used to be the training ground for the next generation. So while AI may not be the sole cause of the current crunch, it is a major factor shaping this new and much more challenging reality for young people starting their careers.
All right, so let's zoom out from the individual job seeker for a second and look at the much bigger picture. Because the effects of AI go way beyond just hiring patterns. This technology is starting to rewrite some of the fundamental rules of our economy, especially around two huge themes: the concentration of power and systematic bias.
This slide shows us that the benefits of AI are definitely not being distributed equally. Not even close. The same study found that for the largest firms, the growth from AI was huge. For medium-sized firms, it was milder but still positive, but for the smallest firms, the effect was statistically insignificant, basically zero. This creates a winner-take-most dynamic. The large firms have the money, the massive data sets, and the talent to build these incredibly powerful AI systems, which lets them pull even further ahead of the competition. And that risks creating entire industries dominated by just a few mega firms, which has enormous long-term consequences for innovation and for us as consumers.
The other huge systemic risk we have to talk about is bias. Now, when we say an AI is biased, what we mean is that it produces systemically prejudiced outcomes, often without anyone intending for it to. So how does that even happen? Well, imagine you're building an AI to screen resumes for a top engineering job. For its input, you feed it 20 years of hiring data from your company. But if your company historically hired mostly men for that role, the AI doesn't learn about skill. It learns a pattern that says male names equal success. That's a biased input. Then, the system might learn that certain features, like maybe attending an all-women's college, are negative signs. Finally, it assigns weights to all this, deciding that a name or a zip code is way more important than it should be. It's basically how our own human biases get baked right into the code.
And this is not some theoretical problem. These are documented, real-world examples. Research from the University of Washington found significant gender and racial bias in large language models when they were used to rank job resumes. Other studies have shown that some systems will just systematically score a resume with a white-sounding name higher than an identical one with a black-sounding name. We've even seen political leanings pop up. A 2025 report noted that while early versions of ChatGPT showed a left-leaning bias, some of the newer models had actually shifted to show a right-wing bias. When these kinds of biases get embedded in systems that are operating at a massive scale, they pose a profound challenge to fairness in our society.
So, we come back to that original question. Is it destruction or transformation? The evidence so far points overwhelmingly to transformation, but it's a disruptive, complex, and deeply unequal transformation. It's creating growth, but it's also concentrating wealth and power in the hands of a few. It's demanding a whole new set of skills while making a lot of traditional career ladders just obsolete. And it threatens to encode our worst historical biases into the automated systems of the future. The data shows us AI isn't some tidal wave that's going to wash all the jobs away. It's more like a powerful river, carving brand new, unpredictable channels through our economy. And that leaves us with the ultimate question: how do we, as individuals and as a society, learn to navigate it?